My name is Sal Fisher and I live in Geelong, and I spent my teenage years in Geelong growing up, and I really appreciate the wonderful lifestyle and unique Bayside city that we share. I lead a group of passionate, local and hardworking Australian Conservation Foundation community Geelong volunteers who've organised this event. We're seeking renewables, not gas, for Geelong. We're deeply concerned about the gas terminal projects for Corio Bay, and it's our belief that pursuing renewable energy and actively addressing climate change will create a much better future for Geelong and its residents. We're joined tonight by several dignitaries. We have Councillor Maloney, Councillor Mason and Councillor Murray from the City of Geelong joining us. And we're also joined by a representative of the federal member for Corio, Richard Marles. We've received apologies from the Honourable Member for Geelong, Christine Cousins, and the Honourable Member for Lara, John Aaron. We're also joined by at least 3 representatives from Viva Energy tonight, Joe Powell, Rob Mackey and Patrick Stock. We welcome you and encourage you to listen to the community's concerns about this proposal. We have almost 250 people booked in for this community meeting, which shows the high degree of concern about this proposal. As the meeting is so large, we've been forced to switch to webinar mode. This is our first go at running a webinar, and in fact the first Zoom for one of our participants. Bear with us if we have any tech problems. This forum builds on earlier community meetings that we've held regarding gas terminals for Geelong. In February, we had about 90 attend our first meeting, then 170 attended a sold-out meeting in April at the Geelong West Town Hall. And now, despite the stresses and the challenges of the pandemic, tonight's attendance shows the large and growing concern from the community about the gas terminals proposals. We've also networked with a large and growing number of community organisations about this proposal, and will continue to do so. And we thank those organisations for attending tonight and showing their support. Many of these organisations have shared their logos with us on our website to signal their support for the campaign. So welcome everyone. I hope that you find this evening informative and also empowering as to how you can help and get involved with the campaign. We will be recording this evening's presentations for the many people who've been unable to attend this evening. We're very fortunate tonight to be joined by Melinda Kennedy, who is a local Wadawurrung traditional owner, who has kindly offered to perform a welcome to country for us. So thank you, Melinda, and over to you.
Thank you, Sal. I will be using some clapsticks, so be aware they're quite fresh. They might be a bit loud, but I'll try to keep a hold on them. Mulang mulak narik Melinda Kennedy, warang barangek, waraki daman yaro, warang ja, warki, warang kulanja, jileng, Muriu, Murapanyu, named by my ancestors. We live by Bunjil's law, the Karangalabo Murup, the creator spirit, the leader. He oversees. We care for country and all things living. Our stories and themes are set by the landscape, incorporating the traditional knowledge and stories to a place is culturally respectful. We are here to care for our country and protect our people. My mother and her siblings have many stories of Murapanyu, North Shore, a place of shallow waters, where the water was so clear you could see your feet, walking from Geelong Grammar to the North Shore Murapanyu, collecting crabs and pippies for fishing on these very shores. It was a special place where she brought my sister, my brother and I to swim. The memories of the gritty, shelly, crunchy sand. It's unfortunate that this place is compromised as a generational swimming place for my children, nieces and nephews. Watching the decline of the natural environment over the years, I pledge I will work with my aunties and uncles and future generations for the health of this important system. I will stand for my ancestors who cared for this place for thousands of generations. Nura Warren, Bengo King, Kinkimbil, Wari Guranguli, Nalingi Guli, Barangak, Boran, Nalingi, Bengin Kambam, Waranja, Beniti, Kanama, Bar, Dalama, Bengadak, Nala Nala La, Bar, Gupnya, Nara Dat Mokburi. Welcome everyone, and thank you everyone who is all involved in this tonight. It's a very special place for me and my family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melinda. We really appreciate that warm welcome to country, and we really respect First Nations voice, and we're looking forward to hearing that voice in our campaign. Thank you. I will now move back to sharing my screen. If you can see that. So it's a bit of an overview of tonight. I will provide a very brief overview of the Geelong Renewables Not Gas campaign, and then we'll hear presentations from our 4 speakers, and you'll have the opportunity to ask them questions after all of those speakers have presented for roughly 40 minutes tonight. And then finally, we'll have Sue and Karen who will talk to us about how you can get involved with the campaign before I do the final wrap. So some tips for a good session tonight. As we are in webinar format, you might have noticed at the bottom of your screen a Q&A box. We'd really encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A section. Please don't put your questions in the chat box. That's really just for comments only. So when you write your questions in the Q&A section, please look at other questions which have already been asked. And if they're asking something that you would also like to know, you can click a thumbs up on the bottom left of that Q&A box. And the more thumbs up a question gets, the more likely that question will get asked. So please read other people's questions before, in case you're asking roughly the same thing. So tonight we'll be presenting factual evidence-based information, and ask that your questions and comments also be based on facts and science as well. We value democracy and transparency, and we believe that holding an open community discussion about this will help people to make an informed decision about these proposals. As such, we've left the chat box facility open, but please be respectful in your comments there and avoid making any remarks which aren't based on science or fact. So, Viva is proposing to build a gas terminal as part of its Geelong Energy Hub. In case you haven't seen an LNG tanker and what a gas terminal looks like, the picture on the left shows an LNG tanker on the left and an FSRU, or a floating storage regasification unit, on the right. These are massive vessels, as long as Cunningham Pier, or roughly as long as Cunningham Pier, and almost as high as a giant Ferris wheel on the foreshore in Geelong. Geelong is facing at least 2 of these gas terminal proposals, the first by Viva Energy, which operates the local oil refinery, and the second is by Vopak, a foreign multinational company. The Vopak project is not as progressed, and apparently there is also a third proposal lining up behind the Vopak one. These proposals are similar to the recently defeated AGL gas import terminal proposal at Western Port Bay, which you may have heard about. So why do we say renewables, not gas, for Geelong? Well, Geelong can be a renewable energy hub. We've got the infrastructure, skilled workforce, and a proud manufacturing heritage to position our city as the place for the rapidly growing clean energy industry. There's also a big battery at Moorabool, and Geelong can be a gateway to the booming wind industry in Western Victoria. Building a gas import terminal in our bay is taking our city in the wrong direction. Fossil fuels like gas and coal are on the way out and are losing market share to renewables. Investing in gas infrastructure right now is a road to nowhere and will not provide secure long-term jobs for our locals. Viva hopes that the project will have a life of 20 years, but it can't have that because gas is also a dangerous and polluting fuel that contributes to the climate crisis. Gas can be even worse for climate than coal because it leaks into the atmosphere, and this leaked gas traps more warmth than carbon dioxide, increasing our risks of severe heat, drought, bushfires, and sea level rise. We don't have time to waste on more gas. We need to get on with the energy transition as soon as possible and the thousands of new jobs that will generate. These floating gas terminals and LNG tankers are a big threat to marine life and fishing and resident safety. They would release hundreds of millions of litres of chlorinated water into the bay each day. The Victorian government has already rejected a gas terminal in Western Port Bay because of unacceptable risks to the marine environment, particularly the nearby Ramsar wetlands. We don't want that in Corio Bay either. Thanks to discussions with LNG professionals, we've learned a lot about safety risks associated with having LNG close to our local community, and this will be a feature of tonight's presentation. We already have enough gas. Australia is one of the world's biggest gas exporters, so we shouldn't be needing to import more of it. Australian Energy Market Operator says Victoria has enough gas from Bass Strait to supply until at least 2026. By then, Victorian government programs will reduce gas demand, and these gas terminals will be stranded assets. And one of our speakers will explore this aspect tonight. So we're calling for renewables, not gas, for Geelong, and the state government should reject these gas terminal proposals from Viva and Vopak and support Geelong with investment in renewable energy jobs instead. We're fortunate tonight to be joined by a diverse group of people with expertise in climate and energy policy, the oil and gas industry, and residents with knowledge of local community and from the recreational fishing community. Our first speaker is Rai Miralles from Environment Victoria. Rai is a gas campaigner currently focused on pushing for Victoria to rapidly transition away from gas. He was part of the campaign that stopped AGL from building a gas import terminal in Western Port Bay. He has a background in law and economics and previously worked as a corporate lawyer. Rai will talk about how we can reduce our demand for gas and why this means we don't need a gas import terminal. Please remember to put your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Over to you, Rai.
Thank you very much, Sol. Also, Sarah, if you could share this, thank you very much. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for Renewable Not Gas Geelong for the invitation. I'm really happy this is a wonderful group, and I just want to say to our community that you're very lucky to have people motivated to work against such a potentially destructive project, such as one promoted in Geelong by Viva Energy and Vopak. But what I wanted to talk to you about is just about how necessary these projects are if we do the right things. And this is within reach, and it's very possible. If you could go into bigger screen, Sarah, just so people can see for this, and please go to the next slide. I know that Saul talked about it a bit, but I just want to touch it a bit. Sorry. Can you hear me well? Sorry, I know there's a little bit of, okay. No, so kind of. Let me see if I can, I'm sorry, I just, okay. Wait, give me 1 second to try something. I'm gonna. How's the sound right now? Is it better, Saul? Yes, good, thank you. I just want to say, so there, as Saul said, there are 2 proposals for floating gas terminals in Geelong. What they do is that they would bring gas from anywhere in the world. This could be fracked or coal seam gas, gas that in reality would be illegal in Victoria. These are big ships. They would be at least 300-meter long, that's almost as long as the Cunningham Pier. So for them to do this, they need to use energy to first cool the gas to 160 degrees, and then they need to use energy again to reheat the gas. So there's a lot of energy wasted in this process. This could have huge environmental impacts. And we know, for example, in the case of the proposal done by AGL in Western Port Bay, they rejected their project because it could have a huge impact on gas on the wetlands in the area. So could we next slide? So why we talk about that big shortfall in Victoria? So in general, all these projects of gas are using one excuse. I'm sorry about the noise. It's just I had to leave my house today to get something done, and I apologize. I hope you can here well enough. I will try to make it. So just to make it clear, so all these proposals have one justification, which is that there's a gas shortfall in Victoria. And this has to do with there's a bunch of gas fields that have been running for 50 or 60 years in Victoria that are actually depleting. And for a long time, every time when we talk about gas, we have talked about it being a supply problem. We always need to find more gas. But the reality is that IMO in their last report stated that we have a gas until 2026. And even to 2029 with minor upgrades. This means that we have close to a decade to get our act together, to get our action, decrease our gas demand, and do it with the resources we do. And that means that we will be able to fuel our houses with, let's say, renewables, with an increasingly cleaner electricity, instead of having these projects that put communities at risk and increase the risk of our climate crisis. Next slide, please. So the main problem, and something we need to understand, is that we don't consume gas in Victoria equally through the year. A big problem is in winter, because most 40% of our gas consumption comes from residential users, and they only consume gas in winter because this is the gas they use for heating their homes and heating water. It's mostly for winter. So what we have seen in evidence is that if you actually can switch homes from gas connections to all electric, we could do without new gas sources of gas supply, and prevent any project like this. Next slide, please. Thank you, Sarah. So just to understand again, this is the breakdown of gas consumption in Victoria. As I said, 40% is residential. These are people. This is the sector that is easier to electrify, and I would say commercial as well. Because we have the technology, we have heat pumps that are more efficient and long term are cheaper to run, and as the electricity grid in Victoria is progressively decarbonizing, it's also better for the environment. There are also solutions for manufacturing and for electricity. And in fact, while some people have mentioned historically that gas will be necessary for the transition, the more renewables we have in the network, we actually are consuming less gas for producing electricity. The next slide, please. So a lot of the times people will say, like, this is impossible. We have always consumed gas and we will keep doing it forever. So we just need to find more gas. The reality is that now, even with some minor interventions, gas is already decreasing heavily. Between 2020 and 2025, gas is expected to decrease by 12.7%. And this is with some very targeted interventions by the Victorian government. It's just like normal economics, because a lot of people have learned that gas is actually expensive and it's not as plentiful or affordable as it was. So our position is that even with our status quo situation, gas consumption is going down. We think that much more could be done. Next slide, please. But also, I want to stress that the solution is not only good for the planet. It's not only good for preventing this kind of projects that put communities at risk. It's also good for the pocket. This is from a report recently released by RU, a think tank focused on energy efficiency and also affordability of energy. And they have shown that despite the different levels of energy efficiency, whether it be 6-star or 7 stars, all electric homes are behaving way better. And anyone who is thinking of building a home or buying a new home, they should look into having an all-electric home, as they will be saving money and for the long term. So I just want to dispel the myth and make it clear that right now, and this gap we expect it to increase. Electricity is a far cheaper way to cook, heat your water, and heat your homes. Next slide, please. And as I said, while in the next 5 years with very targeted interventions, we know that gas consumption will go down by 12.7%. We know that this could be way, way faster. In 2020, we commissioned a report that focused on what is the potential to reduce gas demand in Victoria, only using existing technology existing immature technology which is commercially available. And the results done by energy consultants in order to record is that these are only economically viable alternatives. This is not inventing the wheel. We could cut gas consumption in Victoria by around half in 10 years. This would make any project unnecessary, and I would make it clear that projects are mostly run by people who want to sustain gas consumption in Victoria rather for looking for energy security. Next slide, please. So I just want to say that just to clarify, like if there are key things that you need to take out of this conversation. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Salt. Can you finish just reading this slide for me? Thanks. I'm sorry about the problems.
That's okay, Rai. I appreciate some challenging conditions for you there. So yeah, demand is definitely already dropping. IEMO says that existing policies will reduce gas consumption by 12% over the next 5 years, and peak demand will reduce by 40 terajoules by 2030. What's important to know is the Victorian government has just launched a gas heater rebate program for people who wish to replace their gas heaters with more efficient electric heaters. And that will help to shave that demand off the top of consumption so that we can avoid these winter shortfall predictions as soon as 2024. And we'll be switching more households from gas to electric energy would drastically reduce our gas consumption. So all these policies are really important for us to ensure that we can avoid this any need for future gas terminals here in Geelong. Is that the final slide?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Sol.
Yeah, thank you, Rai. We'll certainly be able to share Rai's slides with you so that you can have a better experience of that afterwards. I'll just go back to sharing my screen now. And share the sound. Yeah. Great. So thanks, Rai, for your presentation. It's really encouraging to know that there are policy options which will address both our energy needs and the need for us to reduce our emissions rapidly. Please remember to put your questions for Rai in the Q&A section. It should be visible at the bottom of your screen. And remember to give a thumbs up to the questions that you'd like to see answered. So now we're going to look more closely at the issue of LNG safety. And to start this off, we have a video from Canada, which will show you what has happened in terms of LNG incidents and what can happen with LNG incidents. It's very easy to see the parallels to the situation we have here in Geelong. So I'll just start this video here. You should be able to hear this okay, but if not, let me know. I'll just share my screen. There. So clearly you can see that there are some serious safety concerns associated with LNG, which is a wonderful segue, I guess, or introduction to our next presenter, Garth Norman, who will discuss the safety risks associated with LNG. Garth is a North Shore resident and an engineer within the oil and gas industry, where he has over 20 years of experience. His expertise and experience includes matters of safety and with LNG facilities and technologies. Garth is incredibly knowledgeable about LNG, and so his insights are important for us to hear so that we can make well-informed decisions about the risks associated with this proposal. This presentation contains a lot of information, so we'll be posting this on the website for you to view later. And I'll just stop sharing and over to you, Garth. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Good evening, all. My name is Garth Norman. I live in North Shore, and my kitchen and my family's lounge room is about 330 metres away from the Corio shipping channel, where it is proposed that these LNG tankers transit through. I will be presenting a lot of information. I've only got 15 minutes or so to talk through this. Okay, next slide. The opening to this page here is my opinion, and this will be the only opinion that I share throughout this whole presentation. My opinion is that the LNG import terminals and Corio Bay are not compatible. It's my opinion that an LNG import terminal proposed by Viva within Corio Bay exposes the Geelong public and residents of North Shore to unnecessary risk. It will simply be too close to people and houses. From this point on, I'll be referring to references, scientific information and facts. It's no longer my opinion. The rest is scientific information. And I do encourage you, as I said before, to look that up and make your own decision on the information that is presented. LNG tankers are attractive terrorist targets. Any successful attack on a ship would have catastrophic consequences. LNG facilities should be remotely located. Corio Bay shipping routes are too close to people for LNG tankers. The closest house is around 220 metres from the Corio shipping channel to the residential area of North Shore, which is zoned neighbourhood residential zone. The Sandia National Laboratory reports the following consequences within 500 metres radius of an LNG tanker incident and pool fire. Significant chance of fatality for people with instantaneous exposure. Flammable structures ignite spontaneously. Fire-resistant structures suffer damage, and metal fatigue after a short time, meaning that metal structures will fail. And down the bottom of the page, there's some examples of the different heat ratings and their consequences. Flammable vapour clouds from an LNG incident have been shown to be able to drift 2,450 metres into residential areas. In Corio Bay, established fishing areas will become off limits. And safety and security zones, even if not implemented initially, they remain possible and an effective layer of protection should national or local security threats escalate. Can we jump to the next page? Yep. Let's talk about LNG shipping safety and the Boston terminal, known as the Everett terminal. Viva says that LNG terminals operate in many places around the world in close proximity to cities and urban populations. For example, there is an LNG terminal located in the centre of Boston with LNG carriers safely transiting a busy port on a regular basis close to the Boston CBD. So let's unpack that a little bit and see what the reality looks like in Boston. On the right-hand side, you'll see a series of photos from Boston Harbour, from a Coast Guard escort for these LNG tankers. You'll see that there's a bridge that crosses this waterway here. It's a 6-lane bridge. It's a major thoroughfare for Boston. And when LNG tankers pass, that Tobin Bridge is completely shut off to the public. The Coast Guard escorts all of the tankers in and out of Boston. And I'll just read a quick quote as reported from NBC News. The Coast Guard coordinates an armada of protection for each ship, a helicopter, police divers, marine patrol, environmental police, firefighting tugs, city police boats, Coast Guard vessels. There's also suspension of overflights by commercial aircraft at Logan Airport. Logan Airport is not far away. Logan Airport is where one of the successful hijackings of an aircraft was initiated during September 11 attacks. And at times of elevated security threats, they'll also move to posting of sharpshooters on nearby rooftops. So if this is what's referred to as safely transiting a port, then just be aware of what is involved in maintaining safety around these tankers. There's some references at the bottom of this page. Before we shift, feel free to take a screen copy. LNG vapor cloud and negative buoyancy. Viva says that LNG will vaporise quickly if exposed to air and quickly evaporates if exposed to water. So it will not pollute land or water in the unlikely event it escapes. The reality is that when LNG in large quantities is released onto water, it forms a vapour cloud with negative buoyancy. And negative buoyancy is another way of saying it's heavier than air. The LNG vapour cloud then extends horizontally in the downwind direction much faster than it does vertically. And you'll see a table on the bottom right-hand side of the page. That is the test result or summary table from Sandia laboratory testing, and shows that for a nominal spill, we'll talk about nominal spill later, the 5 metre squared hole size, that this flammable vapour cloud can extend 2,450 metres from the spill site. Okay, down the bottom of the page are a number of references where you can go and look at the science that has been done to determine the LNG behaviour as it spills. We'll go to the next one, Brendan. Shipping compartments and compartment breach. Viva says that LNG is stored in 4 or 5 separate tanks or compartments on board the ship. This means that even if one of the compartments was somehow breached, the cargo in the other tanks would not be at risk, thus limiting the volume of LNG which could potentially escape. There has been an enormous amount of research and studies modelling the impacts of a compartment breach on the LNG tankers, both the modern, up the top there on the right-hand side, which is a membrane tanker, and the original LNG tankers, which are the MOS. What the Sandia testing and modelling using the actual structural detail of the ships shows is that cascading damage and failure in 2 or 3 of the cargo tanks is possible. It will not necessarily be constrained just to one tank. Up to 40% of the LNG in the compartment will find its way in between the hulls and the structure of the ship. And at the low cryogenic temperatures that LNG is, it will actually cause metal fatigue and failure and fracturing of the ship hull and escalating the incident into having a larger effect. The Sandia technical report from the LNG vessel cascading structural and thermal analysis report says that for medium breaches, the MOS and membrane LNG ships would not likely have a sufficient time to find an appropriate anchorage away from the incident site, and they would become disabled or severely damaged. Next slide, please, Brandon. Double-hulled tankers. Viva says that the LNG ships have double-hulled tankers, and that even if the outer hull was damaged during a major collision or serious grounding accident, there are more than 2 metres between the outer hull and the second inner hull, and therefore it's unlikely to lead to a loss of containment from the cargo being carried. What you'll see here is an oil tanker. Following a late 1980s incident known as the Exxon Valdez, many of you will have heard of that, the international shipping community moved to a double hull tanker expectation for all oil tankers, and have moved that way for most ship-going vessels these days. It was a move to prevent the accidental pollution and spilling out of product. Saying that an LNG tanker with a double hull is more safe than an existing oil tanker is a bit like saying that your car has 4 tubeless radial tyres and therefore it's safer than all the other cars on the road. It is a good design, it's solid, and it is the industry standard for at least the past 20 years. On this slide here, you'll see the Lindbergh oil tanker. It is a double hull tanker. It was 2 to 3 years old at the time of this incident. In 2002, it was struck with a small vessel, often referred to as a dinghy, with a small amount of TNT. The incident caused a large rupture in the side of the double hull tanker, released about 14 million litres of crude oil and ignited. Luckily, this occurred remotely from shore. The vessel was 3 nautical miles away from the terminal and didn't escalate into further incident. On the LNG tanker vulnerability, there's a report to Congress that says LNG tankers cause the most concern amongst security analysts because they are potentially more accessible than fixed terminal facilities, because they may transit nearer to populated areas, and because LNG spills from tankers could be more difficult to control. Next slide, please. LNG facility incidents. There are many incidents, and that video that Sal showed earlier alludes to a number of them. I'm not going to go through them. In respect to LNG, Viva says that no member of the public has been killed in an LNG incident. Viva says that when it is as a liquid, it is not hazardous. SIGTO, which was referred to in that video earlier before, says that although LNG has an enviable record, it is not risk-free. Not only are some hazards difficult to eradicate, an accident, albeit rare, is possible, and as a result of human error or catastrophic event. LNG reports to Congress cite LNG is inherently hazardous and its infrastructure is potentially attractive to terrorists. The 2004 terminal fire in Algeria, which was an LNG facility, demonstrates that despite the technology improvements, LNG facilities can still experience serious accidents. In the years leading up to the 2004 incident in Algeria, a large upgrade of that facility had just been completed. There were over 9 million engineering and construction hours in that facility, upgrading the control system to the latest technology and safety systems. There are picked out 4 incidents here to show you, and I'm not going to go through the details. The top one is a standout, a little bit different. There was an incident in a facility and flying debris pierced the double walls of an on-site LNG tank on site. I will also say that in 2018 at the Husky oil refinery in Northern America, there was an incident where a FCC, which is a fluidized catalytic cracker, had an explosion, and shrapnel traveled some distance, a couple hundred feet, and damaged a nearby tank, releasing hot asphalt and the subsequent fire that did escalate further. And I bring that out. It's not an LNG incident as such, but it demonstrates that adjacent or adjoining facilities can also have an impact on the facilities being located adjacent to them, and that needs to also be taken into account with this new LNG proposed terminal being adjacent to 2 existing major hazard facilities. The top right-hand photo there is the aftermath from the Algeria incident, in which 27 people were killed. Liquid hydrocarbon LNG fell onto the ground or lost containment and was subsequently drawn in through the air intake to a boiler, causing a boiler explosion and then subsequent explosions, effectively cascading to a large event at that facility. I'll skip forward, Brendan, onto the next one. People can look at those in their own time. I have mentioned Sandia National Laboratories earlier in the slides, and Sandia National Laboratories were engaged by the US Department of Energy to look at the consequences of a large LNG spill onto water and to enable the US government to put in place the appropriate regulatory regimes to protect the public from LNG incidents and the consequences of LNG incidents. There was 2 large testing campaigns undertaken by Sandia on behalf of the US government. The first testing campaign in 2004 looked at the traditional LNG tankers, which can be categorically visually determined by their spherical dome shapes. And then a subsequent testing program from 2008 looked at the modern, safer LNG tankers with membrane type equipment on board and membrane type tanks. Effectively, the 2004 results demonstrated some hazard zones around LNG tankers. There was industry challenging of the 2004 outcomes on the basis that that study did not reflect the new modern tankers with the latest safety equipment. The 2008 to 2011 testing upgraded to look at those new modern characters, and the results were equivalent. There were some small 6% reductions in some certain case scenarios. However, the recommendations from the 2004 studies, which described this concept known as safety zones or public hazard zones 1 and public hazard zone 2 and 3, which have been accepted by the US regulators and enforced and used to approve any new LNG facility in the US for the siting of these LNG facilities. It really is important to note that in all of the tests that Sandia did, they modelled credible scenarios from a panel of experts, and you will see in both testing programs, the credible scenario hole size for the release of LNG was in the range of 2 to 12 metres squared. From this point forward, you'll see Sandia tables, and they reference what's called a nominal case, and that reflects the 5 metre squared hole size, which is a balance between the less extreme and the most extreme, and is the basis for the hazard zones and is the basis for the regulatory decision-making in the LNG siting process. I will point out a couple of key features in the bottom right-hand diagram. You will see a vapour cloud on top of the water, the negative buoyancy nature of the vaporised LNG as it spreads out across the pool. And that pool there is an 83-metre diameter pool fire. You'll also see the height of the flame, and the Sandia laboratories used scientific equipment to measure the radiation coming from these flames and used it to determine the distances for the respective hazard zones. Brendan. On this slide here, I've got the detail of the 3 hazard zones. Zone 1 extends to 500 metres from the side of the LNG tanker and the release. Zone 2 is between 500 and 1600, and zone 3 is from 1600 to 3.5 kilometres. I will summarise these. Zone 3 is bad, zone 2 is really bad, and zone 1 is really, really bad. I might jump to the next slide, it's a little easier to see. If the Sandia hazard zones are applied to Corio Bay and the shipping channel with which the Viva LNG tankers will transit, you can see these 3 zones highlighted in different colours. The inner zone, being the red, is zone 1, and as you can see, it envelopes the residential neighbourhood of North Shore. The zone 2 extends a large way into Geelong, Rippleside and North Shore. And then zone 3 goes a long way into the populated area of Geelong. Within these zones, more than 30,000 Geelong residents live. Of particular concern are zones 1 and zone 2, and on the right-hand side, if you read the first 2 items for zone 1 and zone 2, you'll really be able to see the catastrophic consequences. The heat that radiates from an LNG pool fire will cause instant fatalities for people within that 500-metre zone. An LNG pool fire is unable to be extinguished and will continue until the flame burns out. And I'll show you some of the results tables from the scientific studies in this coming slides. Down the bottom, I've included some references to the zones and how they're applied and how they're used in waterway suitability assessments in North America, and also some references to the technical papers from Sandia Laboratories. Next slide, please. Interpreting the Sandia results. Table 2, top left-hand corner, 3rd row down, 5 asterisks. That reflects the nominal case. As I described before, this is the balanced case after much discussion and deliberation that represents the creation of these zones. We'll read across from left to right, the hole size, 5 metres squared, a single tank breach. I'll skip the next few scientific items, but what Sandia have found, modelled and verified, is that we can expect a pool diameter around the incident site of 355 metres around the tanker. The LNG pool would burn for 23 minutes, and the distance to achieve 37.5 kilowatts per metre squared is 446 metres. If you recall from the earlier slides, that heat rating is sufficient for steel structures to fail. It is also instantaneous death to people who are exposed to that level of heat radiation. It would be 1,344 metres until we reach the 5 kilowatt per metre squared limit, which is the outer of zone 2. At 5 kilowatts per metre squared, exposure will result in second-degree burns after a short period of time on people. And what is considered safe would be a value of below 2, and that would reflect the outer limits of zone 3. If the vapour cloud that came from an LNG incident and on the ship, if it failed to ignite as it travelled through the residential areas or roads or industrial areas, could extend 2,450 metres from the incident site. As you saw from that image on the prior page, that extends a long way into residential areas around Geelong. The table below, I'll just clarify LFL. LFL is the lower flammability limit. And really what that means is that is the concentration of the methane in the vapour at which the ignition in which it could support combustion. So if we get lower than the LFL, which is 5%, then you won't start a fire. If you're above 15%, you won't start a fire. But it's in that sweet range between 5 and 15% that a fire will occur with that flammable vapour cloud. Brendan, next slide. Layers of protection and moving safety zones around LNG tankers. This image here represents the shipping channel through Corio Bay. The outer red, which corresponds to the zone 1 that we referred to earlier, is also a safety moving zone applied for Darwin LNG tankers. So that is what is applied in other locations. And the yellow line there is the recommended moving safety zone from SIG2, who we referred to earlier as a leading industry organisation. Safety and security zones reduce the likelihood of interaction with vessels or with people who aren't needed to be or who pose a hazard in or around LNG tankers. And in an event of an incident, they provide critical safety distances from the tanker and from an incident to minimise any impact on the public. SIG2, in their document that is titled Site Selection and Design for LNG Ports and Jetties, also refers to safety zones as an airspace safety zone, where there are limits on planes flying over that location as well. All right, Brendan. To bring this story to a close for tonight, I refer you on to this document here, which was a report to the US Congress in May 2012. It effectively is the culmination of about 8 years of physical testing in New Mexico at these LNG pool and testing facilities, and is the official report up to Congress that had been reviewed, sanctioned and challenged by industry, and is what forms the basis of the US regulations today. Out of interest, I will draw your attention to the name on the right. The President of the Senate might be a name that you're more familiar with today. This document here summarises a lot of the scientific studies. If there's a one-stop shop to look at it, this comes pretty close to it. I do encourage you, take a screenshot. It's publicly available, and have a read and make your own decision about the hazards and risks of LNG. I've got one more quick slide. And for those that are unable to get a copy of that document, take your screenshot now. And here are some of the references that went into that report for Congress in 2012, which subsequently led to the US and North American regulations as they apply to LNG. I will leave it there. I hope you've learned something. By any means, do not just take my word for it. Take the time, look up the information. It's there, and draw your own conclusions around whether LNG import terminals are compatible with Corio Bay. Again, my opinion is that they impose unnecessary risk on the citizens of Geelong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garth, for that very informative talk. I really appreciate that huge amount of technical knowledge that you have, and I think we're very fortunate to be able to learn from you. So thank you. I'll just share my screen for our next presenter and welcome them. So our next speaker is Geoff Wilson. Geoff is a well-known fishing identity and writer around Geelong. He's been fishing in Corio Bay since he was 5 and writing about fishing since the 1960s. And he writes a weekly column in the Geelong Advertiser and has done so for the past 40 years. Geoff's contribution to the fishing world has been recognised recently with the naming of an artificial reef called Wilson Reef after him in the outer harbour of Corio Bay. Geoff has a great knowledge of local fishing and cares deeply about our bay and our access and continued enjoyment of it. So welcome, Geoff, and I'll pass over to you now. Thank you.
We recreational fishermen collectively spend an outrageous number of hours on the bay. And in doing so, we sometimes notice things that should be brought to the attention of the media and the public. And I've tried to do that on occasion, and it's got me a little bit of strife, but never mind. That's the way things are. In 1956, the Premier at the time of Victoria, Henry Bolte, he was just Henry then, he didn't receive a knighthood for another 10 years. He gave us the Shell Refinery. Well, Shell Refinery, it created jobs, it was a boon to the economy, but of course, all industrial implementations, like there are quite a few on the northwestern side of Corio Bay, have it's a balancing act because there are environmental consequences. There are problems with contamination, as we've seen in the last, well, what was it? Would have been 65 years that the Shell Refinery's been there. And that raises another situation because these gas terminals are going to require 30 hectares of dredging. And the contaminants that have lain dormant for those 65 years are going to be suddenly released with this dredging. Now, I've had a bit of a connection with the spokesman for the Shell Refinery because I did a Q&A on my column for someone who wanted to know about the effects of regasification and chlorination. Well, I pointed out that the chlorination was to kill the algae on the pontoons was a liability, and I also pointed out that regasification is going to lower the water to near polar temperatures, which is going to be disastrous for the marine ecosphere. Well, I received assurances from the spokesman for the Shell Refinery, Michael Cave. Well, we take his points sincerely, He said the chlorination won't be any worse than tap water. And as for the refrigeration of the water, that cold water was going to be piped back into the refinery, heated up, and released at the temperature at which the water is now released into Corio Bay. Unfortunately, the refinery is reaching its use-by date. It'll probably be decommissioned in 2027. Now, do those guarantees extend beyond that? I think not. With the best of intentions, I don't think they would extend beyond that. However, the LNG terminals are hoping to begin in 2012 and be fully operational by 2014. Now, that requires, as I said, 30 hectares of dredging, another 570 meters of pier docking, high pressure unloading docks, and that tends to get toward a difficult situation, because we just don't know if the LNG management is going to be so caring as the Viva refinery has expressed that it will be. Now, this LNG terminal was originally intended to be placed at Crib Point on Western Port. Now, it was knocked back by the planning minister, Richard Wynne, and this is what he said. Planning Minister Richard Wynne said the proposal from ATL and APA, now that's the people that build pipelines, have unacceptable effects on the environment of Western Port and associated Ramsar sites. Well, hang on, we've got Ramsar sites as well. We've got aquaculture sites at Avalon, which would be at risk through frigid water. We are told that chlorinated water will be used to clean the algae from the pontoon fittings, and it won't be any more chlorinated than tap water. Well, I just don't know that the LNG terminals management will be adhering to that. And there is all that dredging required, as I said, and the implementation of a pipeline, an LNG pipeline of 4 kilometres to Lara. Now, that's a little bit scary, because these pipelines, while they are safe in the main part, you do get the occasional rupture. Now, if you want to look up LNG accidents, if you type in Appendix 4, LNG accidents, you will find a great list of LNG accidents that have happened, and they're a bit scary. One of the worst ones, which Carl alluded to, was in Skikda, Algeria, where there was that the Skikda was upgraded in 2001, as he said, and a lot of implementations were made, but there was a boiler room explosion which triggered a second explosion, killed 27 people, injured 74, and the worst of all, the damage extended far beyond the boundaries of the LNG terminal. And of course, if you go a bit further south, then into Nigeria, a long way further south, you'll have other pipeline explosions at Lagos, Bonny Island, and there's been 1 or 2 others as well, I believe. There are a good many. You can look them up on that. And also, back in the 2005, then member for Lara, Peter Loney, he expressed his concerns at the possibility of a terrorist attack, not at the LNG terminal, but the Shell refinery. And he said of the $20 million being allocated to stop the terrorism threat, he said there would be a specially armed police boat patrolling Corio Bay, and it would be up to the date technologically equipped. Well, I haven't seen that boat, and I don't think that's come about. But if the terrorist threat existed back in 2005, has it diminished? I don't think so. And anyway, but to my mind, terrorists aside, there's a far greater risk from the close proximity of this LNG terminal to the populated areas. The Geelong Grammar School is very close at hand to the area near the refinery. And of course, if you go the other way, St George's Road in North Shore is very close too. Excuse me. And as was expressed by Garth, the ships which are going to the terminal were coming within a few hundred meters of the houses in North Shore. Well, pray to God there's no accidents, but if there is, that's a little bit too close for comfort. And in my opinion, I haven't got much more to say because most of this has been covered, but in my opinion, the implementation of an LNG terminal in Corio Bay at the site proposed is an unacceptable risk that we cannot afford to accept. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and so, bye.
Thank you, Geoff. You've taken to Zooms like a duck to water. Well done. First Zoom ever. I will just share my screen to introduce our next speaker, who's Dr. Coralie Jenkin. Coralie has lived in North Shore for 20 years and is a retired Uniting Church minister. She is the editor for the local newsletter This Week in North Shore and enjoys living in North Shore because of the connection it provides to natural places such as the nearby Lime Burners Lagoon. Coralie will speak from a local resident's perspective and also raise the issue of flags of convenience and how they relate to the safety issues which have been raised previously. So welcome, Coralie, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. We are concerned about Viva's dangerous proposal. I mean the residents of North Shore, know that it's dangerous for us and for our families, for our homes, and to others who visit us or work in the area. We haven't been able to hold a community meeting because of the pandemic, so we can't bring a resolution here today. But I've spoken to many residents as I edit the local newsletter, and all have expressed worries about the Viva proposal, and not one resident has expressed any view in favour of the proposal. We're going to begin with a map that Viva letterboxed. If you have a look at it, and I think it should be up on your screen, you'll see that in North Shore there are a couple of, well, they look like sand hills, wood chip piles. It doesn't show any residents in North Shore, which is wrong because there are about 150 residences and more than 300 people live here. Leaving out the residential area may have been a mistake. Viva makes a lot of mistakes. Or perhaps we're not in there because we're just too close to the danger. To be fair, Viva produced a second map, which I'm hoping will come up on your screen. Thank you. And you will see that there are a few houses, probably more like Nor Lane, but really the residences are places where people like Garth and I live in just near the foreshore. They're not even there in the picture. Really, the ships will travel within 200 meters of our homes and not way back, and we're much closer than their maps show. But really, the map I want to show you is that one that we saw before, which is, yes, thank you, which shows how much of North Shore is actually in either the most dangerous or the second most dangerous zone. I don't have to tell you LNG is dangerous. I don't have to tell you that Viva is a major hazard facility. All of North Shore is in danger. There are other hazardous industries in our area. Should there be a fire or explosion, these would have a cumulative effect. Our near neighbours include Viva's oil refinery and Quantum. You may know that as terminals, which stores flammable, combustible, and corrosive liquids. In other words, all sorts of hazardous materials. Then there's Incitec Pivot, the fertiliser company. Fertiliser as they use in bombs. Closer still is Midway's mountains of wood chips, which had a disastrous fire a couple of years ago. And other hazardous materials, industries surround us, as well as trucks which are carrying hazardous materials all around us. Residents are worried because there is so much danger, and it appears that Viva has a poor safety record. If you lived in North Shore, you would hear often emergency services rushing through North Shore to yet another fire at Viva. You would hear Viva's sirens sounding when there are emergencies. You would smell the smells, you would see the dead fish, you would see the air pollution maybe on your washing. Our concerns about Viva go on and on. We're concerned about the LNG pipeline that Geoff mentioned. It'll be beside the road, which could be hit by a truck in an accident. Boom. This pipeline near our homes is far more dangerous than Viva's oil pipeline to Melbourne. Recently, Viva tried to stop a childcare centre being built near that pipeline because they were concerned, they said in court, Viva said they were concerned that the pipeline could rupture and cause death or serious injury. The LNG pipeline disaster would be far worse. Residents are concerned about the lack of safety and security buffer zones that are required for similar facilities. We're concerned about the lack of safety zones for ships which move the LNG. We're worried about damage to our nearby World Heritage wetlands. We don't want all those extra trucks on the road carrying more dangerous materials near our homes and our children and our schools. And we're worried about terrorism. Fertiliser, LNG, an oil refinery, all together in North Shore, a terrorist's dream. Parts of our area are already out of bounds to the public because they are potential terrorist threat. A terrorist target, sorry. LNG itself is a terrorist target, and so are the ships carrying LNG, and they're right there. Then there are the dangers caused by LNG tankers travelling through Corio Bay. Dangers include the possibility of collision with the buoys, the other markers, with other vessels, and because the channel is narrow and shallow and very close to the coast. It's so shallow that sometimes we see the dredged material above the waterline. LNG tankers are much bigger than the current size of tankers. They are about 350 metres long, whereas the current maximum is 250 metres. Viva's ships are registered with flags of convenience, and I'd like to tell you about flags of convenience. They're a dodgy practice. It means that a ship's owners register a ship in a country other than their own. This way, the owners can avoid regulations such as strict safety standards, and they can dodge labour laws and higher maintenance standards. They register the ship online, few questions are asked, and if there's an incident, it's hard to trace the ownership of the vessel. The countries which register the ships, these are poor countries that want the money from ship registration. They make their money from ship registration, such as Liberia and Panama, don't ratify marine conventions, such as those which cover regulations on ship construction, fire protection, safe navigation, safe management, and other safety and security matters. And they won't sign up for pollution minimum standards, nor for liability for oil pollution damage. Lower fees, less regulation, criminal activity, pollution, major accidents. Remember a few months ago, a ship got stuck in the Panama Canal, stopped shipping throughout the world. Of course, it was a ship with a flag of convenience. Ships with flags of convenience have been involved in many of the highest profile oil spills in history. Remember the chemical explosion at the dock in Beirut last year? More than 200 people killed? A ship with a flag of convenience. Do you really want someone saying, remember that explosion in Geelong last year? You can see online a photograph of a ship which visited Viva this week. It does look rather nice in that, but notice it's Liberian Republic is where it's being registered. Viva's ships are registered under flags of convenience. Mind-boggling, isn't it? North Shore residents want to feel safe at home. It's impossible to feel safe with large ships full of LNG close to our homes. If there's an accident or an attack, we'd be incinerated. One person said, I don't want to live next door to a bomb. We know there are other options. We need to have a reasonable separation distance between where people live and where there are hazardous cargoes. This is not possible with the Viva proposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coralie. Very, very well said, very clearly said. Okay, so we're now on to our question and answer section, and I can see that you've been really great at putting your questions in the question box, so we'll move on to that in just a moment. So I'd like to invite all our panellists to come back, and Rai as well to come back to the scene. I'll just do a quick summary of the presentations that we've had so far. First, we heard from Rai that we can and we need to reduce our demand for gas to address climate change. We can do this, and the Victorian government is already heading in this direction by targeting the removal of gas heaters from homes. We need to do more, but it is achievable. Garth showed that there are significant risks associated with transporting LNG and locating a gas terminal in a heavily populated area. There's a good reason why most of these facilities are located a long way away from people, especially since 9/11. As Coralie and Geoff covered, if the terminal is approved, it's likely to have significant impacts upon our access and the use of the Corio Bay and may impact on the marine environment. In the case of accident or incident, restrictions may be applied retrospectively. And this could impact upon people who live close to the shipping channel and the people using the bay for recreation. So the best way to protect the environment, residents, and retain access to the bay is to not build a gas terminal in Corio Bay. So now we're going to move on to our question and answer section. Panelists and Rai, can you please come back to the scene? Rai, please turn on your screen. Thank you. I was feeling very lonely there. Panelists, where are you? Need to bring you back. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just flick to the, stop sharing my screen and flick to the question and answer section. So we've got, the first question is a question around the role of the City of Greater Geelong. The question is, may I ask if the City of Greater Geelong Council has accepted this proposal, and if so, have they made a statement about this risk to marine life? Now, are you there, Garth? Is that you sitting down? I can't see. Would you like to answer that question, or would you like me to answer that one?
That's for you, Sal.
Okay, so I guess to explain the process, and this is explained on our website thoroughly as well, that the environmental effects statement process, this decision is largely a decision of the state government. However, the City of Greater Geelong will have some input, I guess, into this, in that it does have a role in hearing residents' concerns about this. And there is also a development planning scheme amendment, I believe, which would need to be passed in order for the EES to proceed. That's my understanding. Would you like to add anything more to that, Garth? No, that's okay, cool. Yeah, please join us, panelists. I'd love to see your faces. If you can gather around, that would be great. The next most popular question was, how does this fit with the Tasmanian ferries leaving from very close to the terminal? And Garth, I think that might be a question for you or for Coralie.
Yeah, hi, Sal. The Spirit of Tasmania will commence operations in the port in Corio Bay. They will follow the same path that the LNG tankers will follow up until North Shore, where they turn into the Southern Quay at Corio Bay. As you will know, the Spirit of Tasmania does daily sailings to Tasmania, and throughout a period during summer, for a number of months, they do double sailings. So the coordination of ships and ferries, if I can call the Spirit of Tasmania a ferry, will be managed by Ports Victoria, and they'll need to be carefully scheduled. And one of the questions that we have asked of Viva in a number of forums is, how will they manage LNG tankers to schedule in and around the regular movements? And we don't have a clear vision of what that looks like, Sal. So there will be interactions, and it will be a Ports Victoria role to manage the scheduling and the transit of ships through the channel.
The next question is from Karen. Has anyone consulted the Real Estate Institute of Victoria to understand the potential impact on property values if this goes ahead, especially as Geelong is becoming a more popular and valuable region in the COVID era? Garth or Coralie, I guess, yeah, perhaps you might like to comment on the impact of a gas terminal on the property values around North Shore.
Thanks, Sal. I'm not aware of anybody in North Shore who has contacted the Real Estate Institute of Victoria. As a North Shore residents group, we have discussed amongst ourselves concerns around what would happen to our property values once it becomes well known that the neighbourhood area of North Shore falls within Zone 1, a zone of concern around LNG tankers. And we are really concerned about the impact of that on our property values and our houses, let alone being able to sleep at night.
It was something actually that we also raised in the consultations that Viva has held on the social and economic impacts of this proposal on local residents. So I'm hoping that that is properly explored in their EES studies. The next question, what are the timeframes and processes for approvals for this project? I think that might be a question for you, Rai, around the EES process. Would you like to cover that one?
Yeah, I would love to. Is the noise level okay at the moment? Yeah, cool. So I mean, right now what we're going through is an environmental effects statement process, and right now this is being driven by Viva, which means that Viva Energy, they're in charge of preparing evidence. They need to commission several reports. This is their environmental effects statement itself, and once they, it's on them to actually submit it, and once they submit it, the process in public hearings, the time for the community to get it directly engaged and officially will start. In the case of AGL, they kept pushing forward the date. I'm not 100% sure when they're saying at the moment that they will be submitting it. So if you do know what time they're saying that at the moment.
I have asked Viva for clarification around that. At the moment, we've only heard that it's early next year.
Yeah, I mean, we will. I will probably be contacting you from Delft, but yeah, I think in general we will get an announcement while when Viva submit their statements, and we will have enough time to prepare and organize the community to give a proper answer to their findings.
Thank you, Rai. The next question is from Dan. As a member of a local community along Corio Bay, how will this change to gas from oil affect the local environment or air quality? I think that might be one for you, Garth, perhaps.
Thanks, Sal. It's more of a question for Viva to answer, but I will say that the LNG terminal is additive to the current operations of the Viva refinery, and they will be operating together at the same time. As Geoff mentioned before, the long-term viability of the refinery is a question for Viva to answer. We do know that it is guaranteed to remain open up until 2027, and up until that time, an LNG terminal, its emissions, as well as the refinery, would be additive and cumulative. After that, it would be up to Viva to decide whether the refinery continues to operate and what other activities they may choose to do on that old manufacturing site that they have if the refinery was to close. So at the moment, it's additive. It's not one or the other.
Thank you, Garth. The next question is there an LNG incident? Oh, sorry, if there was an LNG incident, who would pay for costs to repair or restore? Has Viva got a proposed fund that would compensate for an incident? Again, that might be you, Garth, perhaps. I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, again, I would say that is a question for Viva, and they do have a comments and questions capability through their webpage. We have asked that question in a different way a number of times, and we have not received a straight answer from Viva. We've asked about property values, we've asked about incident and recovery. And what is not clear to us, who is responsible and liable if there were to be an incident. Viva positions that the Victoria ports or Ports Victoria are responsible for the ship up until it docks at their jetty. Other than that, segregation of responsibilities, we're not clear where that sits.
Thank you, Rai. Okay, has anyone considered the implications on property insurance, e.g. increased premiums, exclusion clauses? This would impact not only North Shore, but Corio, North Geelong, Rippleside and Drumcondra. I'd like to comment on that. It's more about the insurance rather than the property value itself.
I think the answer, Sal, is we're not sure.
Yeah, okay. So a question from Chris. Have the hazard zones been overlaid on the entrance to Port Phillip Bay?
I'm not aware of hazard zones being overlaid at the entrance to Port Phillip Bay. Chris, what you could do is you could go onto Google Earth. Google Earth has a tool embedded into it. It has a ruler functionality where you can drop a pin in the center of the shipping channel, and then you can measure the distance to the surrounding infrastructure. So I'm not aware that anybody has done that previously, but if you wanted to look into it yourself, that is a really quick way to understand. The distances for Zone A are 500 metres from the middle of the shipping channel, 1,600 metres from the middle of the shipping channel for Zone 2, and 3,500 metres from the centre of the shipping channel for Zone 3. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Garth. Question from PJ. Renewable energy is ideal, but we still need gas. Given BLEVE, boiling, liquid, expanding, vapour explosion type hazards exist with all LPG containers, why use Geelong when nearby Point Wilson is a dedicated high-risk facility which is apart from suburbia?
Sal, it is a common question. You and I have had this discussion a number of times. We've been asking Viva this same question since around March, and we have failed to get a response from them, and we have failed to get any indication that they are evaluating sites which are remote from people. And that question is very pertinent, PJ, and I would encourage you to ask that to Viva as well.
Also, the Commonwealth Government governs Point Wilson. It's not a locally governed facility.
So I think Geoff was saying the Commonwealth Government has an involvement there as well. Okay, next question. What kind of impact does this gas import terminal have on Australia's climate emissions? Viva calculating the impact of homes and businesses burning the gas that they import. They're often called Scope 3 emissions. That might be a question for Rai, perhaps.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
What kind of impact does the gas import terminal have on Australia's climate emissions, as in greenhouse gas emissions? Viva calculating the impact of those emissions from the home and businesses. They're often called the Scope 3 emissions.
Yeah, I mean, I think Viva will be accountable when it comes to the emissions that come from their own operations. That would be their Scope 1. But we need to remember that a lot of these, the emissions from the gas consumption, it's gas that is already being consumed. It will be kind of a like for like. And when it comes to Scope 3 emissions, that wouldn't be, especially international emissions, wouldn't be part of the Australian emissions. It will be, for example, the emissions that come from mining the gas, if the gas comes from another country. But I think that that's not necessarily the main question, because I think the main problem is to remember that no matter where emissions happen, they are contributing to the climate crisis. And I think it's important to pay attention to Scope 3 emissions, because even though they might not be accounted for in Victoria or in Australia, there are emissions that are happening. And we need to be actually investing in projects that reduce your emissions and not increase them.
Yeah, it's good to not get bogged down in the accounting and all that sort of stuff and think about the big picture, isn't it? Yep. Surely this is a question from Sarah, surely this type of dredging will be happening for the Spirit of Tasmania Terminal 2. Is that going to be a problem for water quality? I'm not sure if there's any dredging required for Spirit of Tas, is there, Garth?
No, there isn't, Sal. The Port of Geelong has been meeting regularly with the North Shore Residents Group. And the Spirit of Tasmania, you may recall, around a year ago, did a trial run into Corio Bay. And the Spirit of Tasmania is a much smaller ship than an LNG tanker would be. And there is no requirement to dredge for the Spirit of Tasmania. It fits within the existing infrastructure.
Thank you, Garth. Next one from an anonymous person. Does Viva agree with the Paris Climate Agreement? If so, how does this gas import terminal meet this agreement? Not sure if anyone can comment on behalf of Viva about that. Has anyone heard a similar question to Viva on that? No? No. Might have to ask that one to Viva directly.
I think we can take it on notice and also take a look at the Viva's climate sustainability report. But when it comes to whether a company believes on the importance of facing the climate crisis or the Paris Agreement, I normally prefer to look at what they do rather than what they say. And when it comes to starting an LNG import terminal in 2021, to me it's a sign that they're not taking it seriously enough, at the very least.
Yeah, Thank you. Thank you, Rai. Can anyone advise if LNG can evaporate, as Viva have stated, in high humidity, such as during rain, etc.? That might be a technical question for you, Garth.
Yeah, no worries, Sal. The driving force or the physics of LNG vaporizing is driven by temperature differential. Humidity would have very little effect on the way that LNG vaporizes. The negative buoyancy that we talked about earlier is a phenomenon of the LNG vapor being very cold, and that creates a much denser than air vapor cloud through it. And as it slowly warms up, then its density changes and it does disperse. But we did see before that that dispersion distance can be 2.5 kilometres away before that LNG cloud does dissipate below its lower flammability limit. But just to answer that question, humidity would have very little effect on the vaporization of liquid LNG.
Thank you. And a follow-up question from Sanya. For Garth, if the vapor cloud travels through residential areas, will it act like carbon dioxide and have the potential to smother people?
Correct. LNG vapor, when it is in its kind of vapor cloud and heavier than air, it is what is called an asphyxiant, and it does displace the oxygen with which people can breathe. So if you're not initially overcome by the fumes, if you're caught up in an LNG vapor cloud, it is highly likely that that will find a source of ignition and ignite. It is the ignition and the heat radiation that I was discussing earlier, and I did select to not bring in that asphyxiation piece, but that is a pertinent question, and yes, vaporized LNG is an asphyxiant.
Thank you, Garth. I think we have a rhetorical question from Alison as to why would they choose the centre of the second biggest city in Victoria? How do they justify this decision? Again, that's a question for Viva to answer and be directed to Viva. Thank you, Alison. Margie Abbott has asked, in some countries, oceans and rivers have the rights by law to survive. Are we able to pursue this in Geelong for Corio Bay? There's a lawyer's question for you, Rai. Do you have any comments on that thought?
I mean, yeah, I think we potentially could do a lot more to protect our environment, but yeah, sadly, that's still a struggle in Australia, and we still see a lot of environmental degradation that shouldn't be happening. So just encourage people to be active, do both for people who care about these issues, and to remain active in campaigns like this one to stop bad projects to happen.
Thank you, Rai. Melinda, I'm not sure if you're still there with us. If you are, in fact, the next question might be a good one for you. Are you there, Melinda?
Unmute.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still here.
Thank you for staying with us. I thought you might be the best person to answer this one. Have the traditional owners made a statement on the proposal? Are you able to comment on that yet at all?
I can only comment for myself. I've not heard of any statements, nor have I heard of anything coming out yet. So no, I would say no, not at this moment.
Thank you. Yeah, and we're looking forward to that moment to hear from our traditional owners about this. It's a really important perspective. Thank you. Question from Jackie. There are a lot of workers and blue-collar unions very keen to get this project to go ahead with the promise of jobs. Do you have any idea of the amount of jobs and types of jobs through this deal? And can you give us costings and renewable energy alternatives to counter this argument? Rai, do you have the detail on this one? Or?
Sorry, is the question about the jobs that Viva Energy Import Terminal will bring?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I mean, in this question, I don't know exactly what Viva is claiming, but I know what was the claim for AGL. In this case, was a LNG import terminal that would be a standalone, so it might actually needed more jobs than this one would, because this one would have some synergy with the refinery. In the case of AGL, they were claiming they will be between 42 and 50 jobs. And they acknowledge that most of those jobs actually will be for not people in the area, because this requires a very specific set of skills and knowledge. So yeah, when it comes to jobs, it's very, very low. And when it comes to costing, I mean, I think that that's a broader question about what is the cost of renewable. And I think that study after study, and I definitely can provide with some information if someone wants. Right now, the cheapest way to add energy to the electric grid is renewables. So yeah, that's when it comes to the costing side.
Lovely, thank you. And another question for you, Garth. Could you comment on the risk of this happening, as in 1 to 100 years? I assume the risk of an incident is what's being referred to there.
Yeah, it's a very involved question, that one. I'm not in a position to answer that. Viva have an opinion on that based on some work that they have done. Risk, as you'll know, is probability multiplied by consequence. And what we've been looking at tonight in discussing the siting of this LNG import terminal is the consequence. And we have not had any discussion on probability. So I'm not in the right place to discuss that or have an opinion on that self. But I will just make one other quick comment on the prior question regarding jobs. And we are a little confused. We have asked Viva the number of jobs a number of times. When we had a discussion with AECOM, who are handling the broader assessments of the socio and business economic impact of the facility, we were told that there would be 6 to 10 incremental jobs from this import terminal. When we've asked Viva again, Viva have positioned that it could be up around 60, I believe was their number, but it's not clear what type of jobs these would be, and it's not clear the split of jobs. You do recall that this import terminal is effectively a permanently moored ship. We're not clear where the flagging of that ship will be from, or from which country the staff working on that ship will be from. But clearly the transiting or the taxiing LNG tankers that bring the gas to the FSRU, they will be staffed by the owners of that ship. So that those tankers won't result in any incremental jobs. And it's really around the terminal operation itself and what that looks like. And again, that would be a question for Viva. We have asked it a number of times and we're not clear on what the real answer is.
Thank you, Garth. I think I might need to make this close to the the last question, because we still have to talk about what action we can take in relation to this campaign. So, final question, I'll just say, is there any information about the impact of the Darwin LNG facility? And perhaps you might like to comment about the distance from residences to the Darwin LNG facilities there, Garth, as well in that.
Yeah, so the Darwin LNG plant was one of the earlier export plants, LNG export plants. It is located around 10 kilometres from the city of Darwin. The Darwin LNG is located around 6 kilometres away from the nearest residential area. In terms of impact, I'm assuming the question relates to open access to the bay and people's ability to use the bay for recreation and boating. There is a permanent 500-metre exclusion zone that has been gazetted by law around the Darwin LNG facility and prohibits access from anyone not associated with the plant and not authorised to be in there with an MSIC card for the purposes of doing business at that LNG facility. There are a number of reports over the years of fishermen being fined for being in the shipping channel when there's a tanker approaching or has approached. The 500-metre moving safety zone around that tanker applies for half an hour before the ship transits through that area and lasts for half an hour after the ship transits that area. And there is quite a hefty fine that can be served on people.
Great. Okay. Thank you to all of our panellists for your answers and to these questions. I think we'll need to move on now to the final part of our session tonight, our forum tonight. And I'd like to pass over to Sue, who is going to talk about how we can take action from here in relation to the campaign. So thank you, Rai, and thank you to the other panellists for joining us tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Sue, do you want me to share a screen, or are you going to?
Yes, start off with your screen. That would be fabulous.
Right. Okay. Lovely.
While Sal's doing that, my name's Sue Bull, and I'm one of the people that help organise the campaign at the moment. And it's a very small committee, and we're desperate for lots more people to get involved. I think you can see from tonight that it's been a really, really successful turnout. And tonight we've been looking much more at the impact on residents, but previous forums we've had have also looked at the environment, and we're going to hopefully have a lot more. We're in the period where Viva's collecting its information for its environmental effects statement, and the proposals will start to appear before government, before the minister actually, in a very short time, in a fairly short time. So what I'd love you to do is to see if you can find your way to the website. Now, Brendan's going to just put this website up so that people can get a bit of an idea of what it looks like. So that's it.
Oh,
That's,
sorry, I have to share mine.
Oh, you're going to share that. Okay. So this is the Geelong Renewables Not Gas website. And we've just started to get it pretty well organised, actually. Oh, lost it.
Sorry, do you want to share your screen now? Because I was sharing mine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, now you can do it.
We're getting there. Oh, that's great looking website, I think you'll agree. Now, once you've found your way to that website, what we'd love you to do is to sign our petition. So, Brendan, are you able to bring up the petition? So, yeah, go up there and go to that. That's it. That's great. So, first of all, we'd like you to do this. So, if you sign this petition, which is to the Minister, Minister Wynne, and it makes it pretty clear about pretty much all the sorts of things we've been talking about tonight. Once your name's on that petition, now we've got hundreds and hundreds of people that have signed it. We want thousands and thousands, to be honest. Once your name's on there, that gives us some data on people that support the campaign. So can you do that first of all, because that's going to be useful to come back to us. Once you've done that, can you let all your friends know, and you can see down the bottom there, share it on Facebook or share it on Twitter, because that starts to get the nature of the campaign out there and gets people talking. Okay, so once you've done that, so Brendan, would you go back again and can you go to our shop? Because this is the other thing that the campaign always needs. It needs money. You can donate, but I'm going to get Brendan to take you to the shop. So what you see here is you can order a free sign. Now, it's a huge call flute. It's not massive, but it's a big call flute. And in fact, they're the ones that you've seen sitting behind the speakers here. Now, Brendan's happy to deliver these and help you put it up on your front fence. You might notice during elections, everyone does this. Well, this is a great way to get some visibility for the campaign. So we've just ordered another 100 and we want them all to go out. So you could do that. Or you could actually buy one of our T-shirts. Now, the money from these goes into the campaign. And you've probably got no idea, but we spend an enormous amount of money just on basic things, but they're all needed things. But it also begins to advertise as well. And they're lovely little shirts, and you can see them there. And then down the bottom of that page, you can get stickers. Oh, sorry, Sal's just modelling that one. Look how great it looks. Down the bottom, you can get stickers. These obviously can go everywhere. Books, outside, anywhere you like, and they also help to advertise the campaign. So, yes, please do those and donate. Now, I'm going to hand over to Karen so we can get out of that website. Thanks. Because Karen's going to talk about letter writing. So, there's Karen there. So, I'm going to hand over to you, Karen.
Shall I share my screen for Karen to speak to?
Yes, please do, Sal. I think you have a slide for me. Yep, there we go.
As the name suggests, Geelong Sustainability MP Engagement Group provides a forum to support us to engage with our politicians on the issues that are important to us. So the group provides a regular, safe, easy, informative, connecting and encouraging environment in which you can turn your climate concerns into climate actions. So how that works is that we meet on the third Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m. and at 7 p.m. You choose which one suited you the best. And usually that's online via Zoom. And we discuss climate issues. And then individually, we get a letter or 3 written and sent. So we provide lots of briefing notes, links, templates, advice about how you can quickly and easily engage with our politicians at all levels, local, state and federal, and everyone is welcome in the group. So to be involved, all you need to do is turn up. We'll show you easy ways to get in contact with your elected representatives and to make a difference. So if you'd like to join us, I've just popped a link into the chat, and there'll also be the website that Sue's just showed you will have also a link to the event if you look up events on the Geelong Renewables Not Gas website. So the next meeting is this time next week, or well, there's a 3 p.m. and a 7 p.m. And we'll be making the gas terminal our sort of issue of the day. So we will discuss it and we'll show you resources that are relevant, who you should write to, topics you can discuss, all the stuff that you'll need to know to sort of get something going on the spot. We find that getting together to do something about climate issues like the gas terminal that concern us, that it really beats lying awake at night worrying about lack of performance in Canberra. So we feel much better when we get together and we encourage each other to put pressure on our MPs and to get some action in Parliament. So as I say, all welcome. Please join us. Thanks, Al.
No worries, thanks.
So, thanks, Karen. That's great. And I'm only going to keep you for a minute or two more, but I'm hoping you're getting itchy feet now. And I'm hoping that you're feeling that as the period moves for when they're going to start to really lift some of the shutdowns that we've all been involved in, that you might like to come along to a picnic. Now, the picnic is going to be at Morpaniel Park, and Garth, so our 2 of our speakers tonight actually live in the North Shore, as you're aware, Garth and Coralie. And Morpaniel Park faces straight onto the shipping lane. It's actually a beautiful park. And we've decided that we'd like everyone to come down there on Sunday, November the 7th at 12 o'clock for a picnic. We'll do it all in a very COVID safe way. So it'll be bring your own blanket and bring your own picnic, but also more importantly, bring your own sign. Because we want the community to come out and show that we're together in this and that we want to say to each other, no, we don't want this thing to go ahead. So bring your protest sign. It'll all be done very COVID safely, as we said. And that's on Sunday, November the 7th at 12 o'clock. And next Wednesday at 5:30, we're going to organise, get an organising committee together. So we'd love more organisers or more people who feel passionate about this to come along. And Sal will send out some details of that later on. And the last thing, on our website, there's a Join the Australia Conservation Foundation Geelong group. Now, it's the group that's helping us bring this campaign together. And the more members we've got, the better we're going to be able to run this campaign. So please go to the website, look all these things up, book in November the 7th, because we need you down there with food and placards. And if you're free next Wednesday night to help us get this all organised, we'd love to meet you. So thank you, Sal.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Karen, as well, for sharing those great ways that we can all get involved. So before you all hook off tonight. We've got one or two more things I need to share with you. The first is that we would really appreciate it if you can complete a quick poll for us, which we have devised. And Sarah, I'm hoping that you might be able to post the poll there. We would really love your feedback about this evening, and that's really valuable to us as volunteers. So I'd also like to really thank all of our presenters and Melinda for her warm welcome to country, and all the volunteers who've helped to bring tonight together. Without their input, we would not be aware of this potential threat and the impact of this proposal on our community. I'd like to thank the team who've organised and promoted the event. In particular, I'd like to thank the many, many volunteers who've donated hundreds, if not thousands of hours towards this campaign so far. There are many people who've been out letterboxing on the weekends and talking to the public to ensure that the community is aware of this proposal. So in the context of a pandemic and the challenges and enormous stresses that this has brought into our lives, this is no mean feat. So thanks to those volunteers for your generous contributions. I guess I'd just also like to reinforce what Sue has been saying. Please join us. Don't be a passive bystander. Now is the time to get involved. Bad things happen when good people don't participate in their democracy and make their views known. We believe this issue is really important and everyone's voice counts, and residents should be heard. These proposals are not a fait accompli, and we need people to stand up and be counted and participate in the ways that we've suggested tonight. So we need to be the good custodians of our country, protecting our air, land and water, and by doing that, we'll protect ourselves. The future of Geelong and this country is no doubt, is without doubt in renewable energy. And we need to be demanding this of our leaders and encouraging local businesses to be part of that future. So as I said before, I'll be sending out a follow-up email with all the details that have been mentioned before, and the presentations and links to those for tonight. So please join our call for Renewables Not Gas for Geelong. Thank you everyone, and good night.